Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Caregiver's Toolbox Tools for Everyday Caregiving. We'll give you information and education on senior care topics. My name is Ryan McAniff. I am the owner of Minute Women Home Care, a private home care agency located in Lexington, Massachusetts. And we have a guest with us today, John Younger of Assisted Living Locators. John, what is going on?
Hey, Ryan, how you doing today?
Doing
Lots going
well.
on. Lots going on.
I love your background. It's definitely the most business savvy Zoom interview I've done. Just making sure everybody remembers who you are, and it helps me. Just like, do I have the name right? So you help people find assisted livings, as if your name was ambiguous or something, but you help people find assisted livings who are looking. And I say this, you're needed in this time because there are so many assisted livings out there and so many choices for people. It does not seem like COVID has changed the fact that assisted livings are being built like Dunkin' Donuts in this New England area, one on every corner. So it makes sense that somebody like yourself knows about all this stuff and helps people. So explain yourself, introduce yourself, and what does Assisted Living Locators do?
Oh, great. Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here. John Younger. I own Assisted Living Locators. And to your point, the name says itself. I help people, I educate people and help people find the best assisted living, healthiest and safest environment that's out there. As you said, I cover Eastern Massachusetts. I work with roughly 252 different assisted living communities. So yeah, there's a ton of them out there. And yeah, if you draw a 10-mile circle of where you may be living, there's going to be at least a dozen choices. So it's my job to go out and meet all of the different assisted livings that are there, understand their features and their benefits, what makes them different from the guy across the street, what makes them, what do they offer that's might be more beneficial to a particular client that I might be working with. Fortunately, Ryan, all of the assisted livings they're all very good places. But what I do is when I meet a client, we drill down into geography. Where do you want to live? Medical issues, because every assisted living does and is capable of doing certain services for individuals depending upon what's going on. Some of them will be able to handle from right through the aging process, right through hospice or in passing away. Others choose not to go that far, and that's okay. That's just their business choice. So when I'm talking to people and someone says to me, well, I grew up in Linfield and I want to stay around Linfield, I'm not going to talk to them about places in Dedham, because it just doesn't make sense. And then they might be like, well, I grew up in Linfield, but right now I need assistance with, getting up out of bed. I need one person to help me just get up going in the morning. I'm going to be able to know what place can help them do that and what places may not be appropriate for them.
Yeah, I definitely see that point because people, and I'm sure you've heard the maybe argument against using assisted living locator. Well, I could just go on Google Maps and see who's in my area. Well, you absolutely can, and you're going to see the different buildings, and you can definitely go into those buildings on your own, and you're going to be able to see that they all look nice. They're all pretty updated. Some are more modern, some are more kind of, old-fashioned, and in a good way, like classy old-fashioned, just the decor that they have. But the care that's provided and the services that are provided are big things, because you're going to think to ask questions that are specific to somebody's needs rather than somebody sitting there going, well, how does it look and how does the food taste? Well, those are important, but those aren't necessarily always the most vital things to find out about an assisted living.
Right. So the biggest part of my job is I don't just send my clients off into the wilderness and say, here's a few names, go check them out. we'll go through a process, and I'll pick 2 or 3 places, and that's all I'm going to do is 2 or 3, and they're going to be specific to my client's needs. And we go together like a real estate broker. We go and we tour the places together so that I can help them ask the questions that they don't know to ask, which is okay not to know what to ask, because that's not what you do. I mean, unless you have loved ones who move into assisted every week, you're not going to know what to ask, because this is something very emotional, very daunting, very new. So I'm going to go with them to the places and help and introduce them to all the key people, and we'll talk about the different things that these communities have to offer, what they do offer, what they don't offer, what are the expectations. And to step back a little bit to your point about just calling a place and looking on the website and going to visit, the reason why I got into this business was I had a family relative about 9 years ago who ended up moving 3 times in 3 years, because the family just went on the internet, had certain expectations, but the thing is those expectations were not met because nobody asked about those expectations, because they didn't know what to ask. So moving 3 times in 3 years is just, it's a crazy amount of emotional stress that shouldn't happen. Whereas I'm able to guide them and direct them so that the one move is the one move. And the questions, and then my favorite question to ask is, and this is what kind of was the tipping point for my relative, was what about paper products? You know, you might think it's a silly question, and some of my communities think it's a silly question, but am I going to get toilet paper? Am I going to get Kleenex, or do I have to bring my own stuff? Assisted living is a private pay. It can be expensive. It's out of pocket, and it's expensive depending upon your perspective. But when someone is paying like an average of $6,000 a month, and all of a sudden they find out a week later they ran out of toilet paper, and they're not going to get it from the community, you got to go off and buy it yourself. That becomes a small problem. That becomes a big problem. So it's a weird question, but people love it when I ask that question, because they don't think about that. And the same thing with the communities. The sales folks that are at the communities, they like it when I ask that question, because then they can set the expectations as well. Because I'm not only placing, I'm working with clients, but I'm also working with the different community. I'm matching the right person to the right place at the right time. I'm educating the families on what is assisted living, what is independent living, what is memory care within assisted living. But I'm also helping the different communities and the folks who work there understand the type of resident that's going to be moving in, because there are, both ways. It's not just a one-way thing.
And one thing that I think is interesting that people need to remember is that as you do, I go into assisted livings and I get to know different people there. And what you can come to expect with most assisted livings and nursing homes, especially the more corporate they are, is there's turnover. And so the kind of thing that we say to one another is that if you're not meshing with somebody in an assisted living, wait 6 to 12 months, because there's going to be somebody new in that position likely. People move from job to job. People do a good job in their profession. Some people don't. And, longevity isn't necessarily something that occurs very often in senior care communities and nursing homes. There's a lot of turnover there. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it's not necessarily the fault of the salesperson or the new RCD or the executive director that's an assisted living. But if you go in and tour with a sales director of an assisted living that's been there for a month or a month and a half, versus they go in with you, you're going to know what questions to ask. And you might very well know more about that building than the salesperson who's doing the tour knows about the building, because you are the owner of your own business. It is your job to know about these buildings. And that person that's touring that building might be a temp from corporate that's there to help out until they hire a full-time person to take over that position.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means
Right.
that they don't know the nooks and crannies of that building like maybe somebody who's been there for 8 months or 12 months or 16 months would normally know. And I think that's probably a value you bring to the table that a lot of people out there may not realize is of value. You know what I mean?
Right. 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 So, I mean, to your point, there's a lot of flux in the healthcare industry just by the nature of it. And especially in assisted living, there's a lot of movement because of the nature of it. You've got nursing assistants who, they can be younger, and they're there to supplement some income. They work for a couple of years, or they may have a couple of different jobs. You have executive directors who have a certain responsibility, and they may have an opportunity to move on. Same thing with the sales folks. So I get to know, for lack of a better word, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on out there. I hear about all the different movements that are going on. I learn about all these different things. So I can, if a client were to ask me about a particular place, and I happen to know that somebody's going to be leaving who's key to the running of the ship, I'll tell them, look, this is what's going on. I won't get specific, but I'll say now is not a good time to move in there. However, what I always say too is what's great today is going to change, may change in 6 months, and what's not so great today can also change in 6 months, which is why I have that pulse on what's happening. Unfortunately, the people who are key to the running of the communities, the residential care directors, the chefs, the executive directors, these are all very stable positions. There's not a lot of movement in that upper echelon management, and they're the three people that are very, very important. The executive director, they're the leader. They're the ones who direct, who guide the ship. The residential care director, or director of nursing, or residential care manager, many terms for that, they're the ones who are responsible for the residents' care there. And they're the ones that the certified nursing assistants and the licensed nursing assistants, they report up to them. So if you've got, and the cook, man, there are cooks out there, chefs out there that have been doing places for 15 years because they love what they're doing. It gives them an opportunity to really be creative and develop their own menus. So they have a tendency to hang around. And food is very, very important.
And that's what people are going to complain about or praise the most.
Yeah.
How is the food? Because we can all relate to that. Thankfully, you and I cannot relate to what's it like being showered by a stranger who's coming into your room and seeing you naked and making sure you're clean. I haven't had that experience yet, and I don't think you have either.
No.
And that's not a pleasant experience to always necessarily talk about, but you can always relate back to cleanliness and how are you being treated, and then how is the food. So I definitely agree. The chef's a big one there, right?
Yeah, and they seem to have a lot of longevity too, because I think they really enjoy what they're doing. The folks who move around, even the certified nursing assistants, a lot of them that I know have been, 5, 6, 7 years, and that's a good period of time.
The other reason is they don't have to be up till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night serving people on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They probably they probably sit there and go, I can work a Monday through Friday, and I'm out of there by 7:30. We are done at 7:30. Where the kitchen's spotless by 8, no later than 8.
Yeah.
Now, one question I do have for you is we're right in the now. Right now, probably we're hoping between halfway and 2/3 of the way through COVID. We're hoping. What was it like before COVID? What was that process like for the steps where people would use your services, and then what was the what's that process like right now with interacting with people, learning about their needs, and then going into these communities that you need to go into. You need to be able to tour it, but you have to be super aware that these are the buildings, nursing homes and then assisted livings that had a lot of tragedy and death that
Yeah.
occurred in these places. What's that process look like these days?
Well, it's, fortunately we're towards the tail end of things. So in the beginning was very, very difficult. Most of the buildings were shut down to visitors and vendors and professionals. Um, and it was just it was very stressful for everybody, and especially for residents and their families, because all you could do is look through a window at each other. You couldn't hug, you couldn't, hold hands, or, you have to be looking through the windows. Trying to pick out a place, it became a virtual tour, and that's not quite the same as physically being able to go in and walk around and touch and smell and feel and taste. So what's changed is, positively, I think that assisted living is probably healthier and safer today to live in and move into than it was. Not that it was bad in January, but there's so much that has been learned through this crisis of, sterilizing, hand sanitizing, sterilizing, proper equipment, stop shaking hands. The elbow thing, yeah, that's getting old too. But I honestly believe that now is a great, especially with the fall coming and the winter coming, now is a great time to really seriously consider assisted living, because of everything that they have learned in this process. Is not something that they're going to stop doing when the COVID ends in 6 months or whenever that might be. They're not People are not going to all of a sudden stop washing their hands or sanitizing or keeping a little bit of a distance or a little bit more respectful physical distance. I think that's something that's going to stay with us, because I haven't I haven't gotten a cold in over a year. So clearly I'm washing my hands a lot more than I ever have before. So
And hopefully that will be a positive,
that's
uh,
a positive habit.
with just the flu as well, right?
Yep.
Everybody's washing their hands. Hopefully the flu isn't that bad.
Yep. Nice. I think we've all learned some very positive habits, and the protocols are there to keep us and the staff members safe. Today, fortunately, there is some touring going on. In fact, I went out last night and did a tour, but it's limited. And when I mean limited, it's limited to the number of people. So it's usually like two family members, or it could be one family member and myself. And that's kind of how it's affected me the most. Is I haven't been able to physically tour with families as much as I'd like to, but I'm able to at least coach them. I'm able to at least, I lost the picture for a second. I'm able to at least coach them through the process anyway via phone, and I still have the contacts with the same folks that I had before, as far as the buildings are concerned. So I just truly believe that the fear is still might be there, but please be less fearful if you can, and have an understanding that science has risen and understood, taught all the protocols.
Now, one question that would be interesting for people to know about it, and it says right in the back of you, no cost referral services.
Right.
So that means you're free? That means you
Yes.
don't get paid?
I mean, that means I'm free to my clients.
So how does that work? So, I mean, that's obviously a nice thing. Somebody gets to access your wealth of information. They get your time, they get your expertise, and they don't have to pay you.
Right. Right. So
Sounds
it's
like
a
a deal.
lot like, so I liken it to like a real estate broker. I have agreements with all of the assisted livings where I get a referral fee for whatever one of my clients move in. My family's, and they love hearing that they don't have to pay me. I tell you, I'm not gonna bill you. You got enough bills going on. You have enough to worry about. You're gonna get my consultation service in my physical presence and my knowledge at absolutely no charge, whether you move into a building or not, whether you move into a building that compensates me or not. There are some communities out there that I don't get referral fees from because maybe they're lower income and they just can't afford that referral fee. Or maybe they don't need me because they're always full or have a long waiting list. My job is to make sure that my clients get into the best place possible and they're going to stay there and they're not going to move. So I have no issues with being a free consultation. And why wouldn't you call me? I'm not going to cost you anything. I don't even cost you time. Yeah.
Yeah, and there, like you said, there are just so many out there. Do when this process starts, I do have a question about that. But what does the process look like? Where are people? Where are you finding people that say, "Hey, listen, I need to figure out this assisted living"? What should people listen for? What should people think about? What are generally what's the word I'm talking? What's your target audience? Who are generally you're finding most people are using assisted living locators, and where are you finding them from?
So it's usually the 50-plus-year-old daughter. Sorry, sons, but there are occasional sons. But most of my clients start with it's their parents that's having difficulty and they can't stay home anymore. They're the caregiver and they just either can no longer, their parent the biggest thing is they're no longer safe to stay at home. That's the key. If you're safe to stay at home and you've got good services like Minute Women Home Care, then stay and enjoy that service as long as you can. So that's really my major client. How they're finding me is I have relationships with some of the rehabs out there, but mainly it's word of mouth, and some professional referrals on occasion too. Elder law attorneys, home care companies, real estate brokers. But it's mainly at this point, it's been 4.5 years. So it's a lot of satisfied customers who are telling their neighbors and their friends about me.
And so, just to get an idea of your business, before COVID, how many, I mean, I think it would just be interesting to see how many on average were you placing into assisted livings, because it just shows how many people you can work with at one time. And that, it allows you to be able to say, hey, listen, I can help somebody down in the South Shore, the North Shore, Metro West, and
Right.
Merrimack Valley and Mystic Valley. I mean,
Right.
how many people do you generally, pre-COVID, were you generally placing into helping, I won't say placing, but helping find an assisted living?
Right. So it's probably, I'd say around 80 to 100 a year.
Oh,
So 4 or
wow.
5 a month. And that would include probably half of those that may have moved into places that don't reimburse me, that don't compensate me. So I target 4 to 8 folks a month as my ability to do this as a solopreneur. And actually, in the actuality of it is things have picked up to a point where I'm basically on target for this year, despite the COVID being a hindrance in the spring and summer. Different type of clientele right now. These are folks who are in emergency situations who need to go to assisted living because, maybe their caregiver is, you got a bunch of kids at home that you got a Zoom school now, and you don't have the time and the energy to take care of your parent, or they have to go back to work. A lot of things were going on for families who were caregivers where they had the time to help their loved one. But that's changing now with opening up and going back to work and getting to the point where, and I tell my clientele has changed somewhat because it's an emergency situation. They are no longer safe to stay at home and they have to make a move.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that as well, where people are I think people were thinking that this would be over in a few months, which I think we were all hopeful,
Yeah,
and then realized that it wasn't, and then work, school, life, caring for mom or dad for a month or two was doable, and then it just no longer became feasible to do that anymore. Um, but I mean, that's interesting. That's a lot of people. One question I have, that I just, from a business person to a business person, is that what does your process look like on keeping up to date with 250 different assisted livings, the people that are in there, the
yeah,
different services there, because you got to think 10% of them are remodeling at any given time, right?
right.
So
Yeah,
every year, 10 to 15% or whatever the number is remodel, that you have to go over there and see the new remodeled building to know what it's like, right?
right.
And you're saying executive directors, RCDs, and chefs are your big three. So there is still movement
Yeah.
when that happens. How do you keep up with all that? Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of data to have. I assume you have some type of CRM, but that's a lot of data to keep up with.
Right, right. So it's really, and this just happened yesterday. I went to an assisted living that I hadn't been to in 8 or 9 months. It's been a while, so I made an appointment, stopped in, and we chatted about some of their changes, although there weren't any. But we chatted about some of the other buildings that are going through some changes. So I'm able to keep up with the different things that are going on through my networking. And I don't, when I go and when I network with one person, with you, Ryan, or any, it's not just gonna, you always learn something else about what's going on that's important to know. So the short answer is I just network a lot. I talk to a lot of people. People call me and tell me. I get a lot of phone calls from people that say, "Hey, I want you to know this is what we're doing. This is what's happening. Come on by and see what we've done." Or, "Hey, did you hear this person's leaving and going over here?" So it's all about networking and just keeping in touch with everyone.
And that's, we both get emails, the marketing emails from assisted livings with how many rooms they have available. And so that's probably an important aspect of knowing about these assisted livings is, during COVID, there's probably very few assisted livings that are completely sold out anymore. But before COVID, that was common, that people would be sold out, or there wouldn't be, maybe they'd have a room available, but it wouldn't be the right room, and
Right.
it wasn't the room that somebody wanted. Um, that's got to be a lot of a big thing in in your world, because what happens when the right building is there but not the right room is there? How do you manage with that? Is it just going down to choosing to be on a waiting list or not, or what have you seen in the past when that situation occurs?
Well, there's a couple different answers to that question. Is if the building is totally full, then you're going on a waiting list. If that's the building you want, if that's the community you've got your heart set on, and that's the one you want. I mean, there's also the option of going down the street for a couple of months until that particular building community opens up. But I don't, you don't recommend the multiple moves. But the second answer to that question is if there's a room available and it might not be the room you want, take it anyway. Because once you're in the building as a resident of that community, you take priority. So if you have to start out in a studio as an example, and your heart's set on a 1 bedroom, if you don't move in and take that studio, you might lose out on everything. Once you're in the building, once you're in the community, you have rights of first refusal rather than somebody else, your neighbor, calling up off the street. You'll get that room that you're looking for. This is a very fluid business, as you know. So what's full today could literally open up tomorrow, or what's open today could literally close tomorrow.
And when you're in private businesses like I am, and like assisted livings are, like you said, it can be very fluid. Somebody goes to the hospital and they don't come back and they're going to go to a nursing home. Well, then there goes the room's vacant now.
Yeah.
Things can quickly change when you're at 70, 80, and 90 years old. Unfortunately, usually it's for the worse, but when things change, it's usually a poor change or a downgrade. Now, um, so you are a brainiac when it comes to all the assisted livings that are out there. You know it all. You are the guy. So how do people reach out to you? What do people say? Where are they calling? Where are they going when they say, "Hey, I need to figure out assisted livings. I got to talk to John."
Well, I don't want to say I know it all because I don't, but I am the locator. I'm always calling when someone wants something. I'm always calling the places and asking questions anyway, because I don't. My brain isn't that big. But your question was, how do people get a hold of me?
Yeah, if somebody's interested in using your
Yeah.
services, how do they get a hold of you?
So the best way is a phone call. The best way is stop looking on your own. Stop entering your name into all the myriad of forms that you're going to fill in online, because when you fill out the form online, you're going to get inundated with phone calls, and they're just going to keep calling you and calling you and calling you, which is their job. That's what they do. So the best thing to do is give me a phone call at 508 878 8878. That is absolutely, or a text. That phone is set up for texting as well. So that's really the best way to get a hold of me. I have a website, assistedlivinglocators.com // NE Mass, as in Northeast Mass. But call me up because we're gonna have to talk anyway.
Yeah, I imagine there's a onboarding process. There's like you said, there's going to be a lot of the old saying, if you have 3 hours to cut down a tree. Abe Lincoln said I'd sharpen the axe for 2 hours, right? So you're going
Right.
to have to get all that information, sharpen the axe to know exactly what they're looking for. Then you can go out and find the right assisted living. One question I did have for you is that, would you say the number one reason why people are going to an assisted living would be geographical reasons, or what are the top one or two or three reasons why people choose an assisted living?
Well, number one would be they're no longer safe to be at home. That's medically, physically no longer safe. Too many stairs in the house, just can't climb the stairs anymore, or don't want to climb the stairs. Another reason is they don't want to shovel snow anymore. They're tired of paying the property taxes. Another reason, the big one is also social isolation. A lot of people still own their homes that they've owned for 60 years. At this point in their lives, they may just be living there alone in a big house, may not have family around, or even if they do, they're busy, so maybe not visiting as much. So assisted living is really all about getting yourself safely medically taken care of, and also the no longer being socially isolated, getting the huge benefits of, and we've learned this in the past 6 months, huge benefits of being able to socialize with other people. It really lifts your spirits, as opposed to folks now who are just, it, they're unfortunately having some regression because they can't do and see and say the things that they used to. So get rid of the social isolation, become safer, and have a place where there's someone there 24 hours a day that can help you if you need it.
I think that's great. Well, John, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you explaining your business to me and to the listeners. Please reach out to John at the Assisted Living Locators. I will put your number in the description below. I'll put your website in there and your name so people can reach out to you that way. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. It was a blast.
Excellent. Well, and so thank you so much for listening to the Caregiver's Toolbox every day. I don't even remember my tagline, whatever the tagline is. Thank you all for listening so much. I appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good day.